My name's Riley Riley. I'm the CEO and founder of Glorious Labs. I've always felt that I'm entrepreneurial, and previously I'd founded a digital ad agency called 2020, and I recognised that technology played a huge part in the advertising industry, and it became the third pillar of our business, along with strategy and creativity. And that insight really was the spark that made 2020 different, and ultimately led to 2020 becoming the biggest ad agency, the biggest digital ad agency in the UK, with 550 people. And that same insight is what we now use at Glorious Labs. So innovation being a founding principle of what we do in a technology company. Creativity is the biggest secret weapon in business, and it's amazing how many organizations fail to see that. And there's very little creativity in the tech scene. There's a lot of innovation, but no pure kind of creativity. And I think that's why it takes tech companies so long to get products to market, and why it takes so long for those products to take hold, because they're not rooted in human behavior. And creativity, when you make things fun, when you make things accessible to people, and you understand how consumers react to products or services, I think is a secret weapon. So I'm just very surprised that creativity doesn't sit at the top table in a lot of organizations, particularly in tech. Recently, I think it's the cultural differences. The USA and Asia has a big appetite for hardware startups, so companies can grow faster and they can grow bigger. I think the toughest challenge is in the UK. A lot of investors are risk averse towards hardware startups, and I think that is something that's kind of really surprised me, that the appetite isn't there at the same level as we find in Asia and the US. I think my biggest success has been finding Josh Thomas, who's my Chief Technology Officer and my co-founder. He's still only in his 20s, and he's just a genius tech guy. And I think because he's so young, he kind of really understands the world today. He comes with no previous baggage about how things are done, and he just has this amazing can-do attitude. And I think that, you know, a huge part of the success of our business has been down to Josh's belief that he can do anything. I'd like to think I'm very good at focusing on the real challenges that we have, and not to get distracted from outside forces. In a previous life, I spent 25 years as a creative and a strategist in the advertising industry. And that gave me a real insight into lots of different businesses, lots of different industry sectors. And now that I'm running Glorious Labs, I can really focus on the core challenges that we have, and not to be distracted by the thousands of other challenges that you face on a daily basis. So I'd like to think I'm good at focusing. I think attitude is more important than talent. And that's not to say you hire people with no talent. I think talent is a given. I think attitude is the real kind of important metric that you should be looking at when you hire people. At Glorious Labs, we talk about ourselves being absurdly ambitious. And everyone that I hire has to buy into that absurd idea that we can do absolutely anything. And I think if you don't have the right attitude, then you don't fit in. Now, the attitude in another business may be entirely different, but I think attitude and belief is hugely important. Catching up with my advisory board, I'm fortunate enough that on our advisory board we have senior executives from dunnhumby, from Bacardi, from Facebook, from Engine Group, and just their counsel and their wisdom is just a real privilege to be able to call on a daily basis. If I've learned anything, I think it's self-belief. And I think when you're 18, you don't have the experience or necessarily the wisdom to believe in yourself. So I think if I could go back, I would say to myself, stay true to what you believe in, and it will work. I'm currently writing a book on futurism, which is due for publication at the end of this year. It's an idea that I've had in my head for a number of years, but only recently have I found the time on a lot of long haul flights to actually just put in the work to write it. There's an Italian slang word and it's sprezzatura. There's no direct translation into English, but it essentially means effortless genius. If you think about the Italians through history, they've always had a great history of pioneers and scientists and inventors and painters. And I think this idea of effortless genius is something that we should all kind of consider. And I used to say to my teams when I worked in big organizations is, no one needs to know that you've worked the entire weekend on something. Let your work kind of speak for itself. And I think that for me it became a real joy to be able to kind of over-deliver. And we've done this with Glorious Labs, where we've developed a piece of hardware from nothing. And everyone's amazed at how easily we seem to have done it. And it's been far from easy. I much prefer just to kind of let the work speak for itself. So my philosophy is, yeah, work hard, but you don't need to broadcast that and tell everyone. Let your work speak for itself. I'd want to know what my biggest regret in business was. And I think the answer to that, I think, is when I set up my ad agency 2020, I set it up on my own. Now, no one sets up ad agencies on their own. There's usually partners. So I think my regret is that I didn't collaborate sooner. It still grew to be the biggest, and it won lots of awards, so I like to think it was one of the best. But I think the journey could have been a lot more enjoyable had I kind of shared the workload. So collaboration now has become a kind of keyword within Glorious Labs. And we have teams in Hong Kong, we have teams in Russia, we have teams in the UK, we have teams in the US. So collaboration is like my biggest regret with my previous business. I think Ignition Law have kind of successfully disrupted the very old industry of law. I think they understand that never before have we had so many companies being established by young, inexperienced entrepreneurs that want to do things a different way. And I think you need your law partner to kind of keep up to speed with that. So I think their versatility and their adaptability has allowed them to disrupt a very old industry.